Midnight, in rural Texas. You're sitting on your porch, and the silence is shattered by a sound that chills you to the bone, a chaotic chorus of guttural grunts and heavy snapping jaws. In the pitch black, a shadow army of razor-sharp tusks and 600 pounds of pure muscle is tearing your land to shreds. This isn't a scene from a horror flick. This is the reality of the wild hog invasion, a full-blown ecological war unfolding right now across North America. Right now, more than 6 million of these feral beasts are running rampant through at least 35 states and aggressively pushing north into the Canadian prairies. We are talking about Sus scrofa, the wild boar, one of the most destructive, aggressive, and highly adaptable invasive mammals on the face of the planet. They are smart, they are hungry, and they are practically unstoppable. If you want to know how a regular farm animal turned into America's #1 environmental nightmare, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications because this story gets wild. Let's dive into the invasion. To understand how this nightmare got so out of hand, we have to roll back the clock and look at how this country was built. This whole crisis didn't just happen overnight by some freak accident of nature. It started with a series of deliberate choices made by humans who had absolutely no clue they were setting off a biological time bomb. The story actually begins all the way back in the early 1500s, when Spanish explorers like Hernando de Soto first stepped foot on the beaches of the New World. They didn't just bring ships, armor, and weapons. They brought livestock. Specifically, they brought domestic pigs. Back then, there were no grocery stores or refrigeration, so these animals were essentially a walking, self-replicating food pantry. The explorers would intentionally release some of these domestic hogs into the wild forests of Florida and Texas so that future expeditions would have an abundant supply of fresh meat waiting for them. These early farm pigs were tough, but they were still just domesticated animals. They learned to survive on their own, turning into what we now call feral hogs, but they still generally stayed within certain limits. They were a nuisance, sure, but they weren't an existential threat to the continent. Not yet, anyway. The real match was thrown into the powder keg a few centuries later, right around the turn of the 20th century. That is, when wealthy American elites and sports hunters decided they wanted a new challenge. They didn't just want to hunt local game anymore. They wanted a true old-world challenge. So, they imported wild Eurasian boars straight from Europe and Russia and placed them into private hunting preserves in places like North Carolina, California, and Texas. These Eurasian boars were completely different beasts compared to regular farm pigs. They were fierce, heavily built, and armed with razor-sharp tusks. But here is the thing about wild animals. They do not like being fenced in. It didn't take long for these imported wild boars to break out of those wealthy hunting estates. And that is exactly where the plot thickens and the story takes a terrifying turn. Once these massive, aggressive Eurasian boars escaped into the deep woods, they ran straight into the wild populations of escaped domestic farm pigs that had been breeding since the days of the Spanish Conquistadors. And nature did what nature does. The two groups began to crossbreed. The result of that accidental genetic mashup is what scientists and wildlife biologists now call a super hybrid. This super hybrid is the ultimate biological survival machine. It took the absolute worst traits of both worlds and combined them into a brand new monster. From their domestic ancestors, these hybrids inherited a massive, hyper-prolific reproductive rate. They can pump out huge litters of piglets multiple times a year without skipping a beat. From their wild Eurasian ancestors, they inherited an incredibly thick skull, a relentless aggressive streak, sharp tusks, and a highly advanced level of intelligence. We are talking about a creature that routinely tops out at over 400 pounds, with some massive boars pushing past the 500-pound mark. That is a quarter ton of pure, unstoppable muscle. They are shockingly fast, fiercely protective of their young, and possess a level of cunning that leaves wildlife managers completely baffled. They can learn to avoid traps, they communicate with each other, and they can adapt to almost any environment you throw them into. They are a perfect storm of human carelessness and evolutionary adaptation. Where are you watching this video from? Please tell us your country or city in the comments, and let's explore together. Because whether you live in a bustling metropolis or a quiet rural town, understanding how these super hybrids conquered the American wilderness shows just how quickly the balance of nature can be completely flipped upside down. Now, to really grasp why this crisis is so terrifying, you have to look at the actual biology of these creatures. They are packed with what you could honestly call built-in biological weapons that make them almost completely invincible against anything we throw at them. First off, let's talk about their reproduction, because this is where the math gets absolutely staggering. These super hybrids are built to multiply like nothing else on land. A regular female hog can hit sexual maturity and start breeding when she is just 6 months old. Think about that for a second. They are still practically babies themselves, and they are already pumping out the next generation. And they don't just breed once a year like deer or bears. They can drop multiple litters every single year. Each one of those litters can easily range from 4 to 12 piglets. If the weather is good and there is enough food, a single breeding pair can spark a population explosion that floods an entire county in just a couple of seasons. It is a relentless, non-stop assembly line of new hogs hitting the ground running. But it gets worse. Once those piglets grow up, they have to eat, and that brings us to their absolute zero-merit dietary habits. These things are the definition of a walking garbage disposal. They possess an absolute omnivorous mechanism, meaning if it contains a single calorie and fits inside their jaws, they will swallow it. They will use their rock-hard snouts to plow through the earth, ripping up native plant roots and destroying agricultural fields. But they don't stop at plants. They will actively hunt and eat small mammals, lizards, frogs, and snakes. They will track down the nesting grounds of ground-nesting birds, rare sea turtles, and local wildlife, ruthlessly devouring the eggs and the hatchlings. They are basically vacuuming up the entire bottom of the food chain, leaving absolutely nothing behind for the native species that actually belong here. On top of their insane diet, these hogs are built like tanks when it comes to dealing with the elements. They possess a level of weather resistance that is just downright unnatural. For a long time, wildlife experts thought the freezing northern winters would act as a natural barrier to keep them from spreading. They assumed the deep snow and sub-zero temperatures of the northern states and Canada would wipe them out. But they were dead wrong. These hogs just adapted. In the freezing northern prairies of Canada, they learned to tunnel deep under the snow, creating insulated snow caves where they can stay warm and cozy even when it is 40 below zero outside. Flip to the other side of the map, and they are thriving in the scorching, bone-dry deserts of America's southern border, finding water where nothing else can. Mud, snow, swamps, or mountains, it literally does not matter. They can handle it all. And here is the final piece of the puzzle that makes this a total ecological disaster. They have absolutely no natural enemies left to keep them in check. In a balanced ecosystem, a massive predator would step in to control a population like this. But out here in North America, our large apex predators like gray wolves, mountain lions, and grizzly bears have been pushed out of most of their historical ranges due to human development. The few predators that are left are scattered too thin to make even a tiny dent in a population of over 6 million wild hogs. A fully grown, 400-pound boar is a walking tank armed with razor-sharp weapons, and a regular coyote or bobcat isn't going to look at that and think it's a meal. They will stay far away. With zero natural predators to hunt them down, a flawless resistance to extreme weather, an appetite that consumes everything in sight, and a breeding cycle that works around the clock, these creatures are completely rewriting the rules of the American wilderness, and the native ecosystem is paying a devastating price. When you look at the sheer scale of this invasion, it becomes clear that we are not just dealing with an annoying wildlife issue. This is a multi-layered onslaught, hitting us from three completely different angles all at once, tearing apart our economy, fracturing our natural environment, and putting our very health at risk. First, let's look at the staggering economic toll, because the numbers are flat-out mind-boggling. Every single year, these feral hogs drain between $1.5 billion and $2.5 billion directly out of the United States economy, and the vast majority of that heavy blow is absorbed by American farmers and ranchers. Imagine waking up as a farmer, looking out over a multi-million-dollar field of corn, wheat, or peanuts that you have spent months pouring your blood, sweat, and savings into, only to find it looking like a war zone. A single sounder of these hogs can move into a field overnight and plow up acres of valuable crops, chewing through the plants and trampling whatever they don't eat. But they don't stop at the crops. Their massive bodies and constant digging destroy critical agricultural infrastructure. They smash through fences, collapse expensive irrigation lines, dig giant hazardous craters that break tractor axles, and ruin managed pastures. It is a financial hemorrhage that keeps growing every single year, driving up production costs and ultimately threatening the food supply chains that everyone relies on. But the financial bleeding is only one side of the coin. If you step away from the farmland and look into the deep woods and local waterways, you will see a total environmental catastrophe unfolding. The culprit behind this ecological ruin is a behavior known as rooting. These animals use their rock-hard snouts and powerful neck muscles like living bulldozers, relentlessly flipping over the topsoil to hunt for food. This constant churning strips away the ground vegetation, leaving the bare earth completely vulnerable to massive wind and rain erosion. When the heavy rains come, all that loose, ruined soil washes straight into local creeks, rivers, and streams, choking out aquatic life with thick silt. And speaking of water, their bathroom habits are causing a massive public safety crisis. These hogs love to wallow in shallow water and mud to cool down because they cannot sweat. While they are hanging out in these water sources, they leave behind massive amounts of waste. Wildlife biologists testing these affected waters have discovered that feral hog activity can cause toxic bacterial levels, specifically dangerous strains like E. coli, to skyrocket to over 40 times the normal safe limit. This concentrated pollution poisons the drinking water for native wildlife, completely destroys fragile aquatic ecosystems, and ruins downstream water supplies that local communities rely on for recreation and daily use. That brings us to the third and perhaps most terrifying angle of this crisis, which is the direct threat to human and animal health. These creatures are not just clean, wild animals living in the woods. They are literal walking biohazards, functioning as highly active mobile reservoirs for a horrifying laundry list of dangerous diseases. Scientists have confirmed that wild hogs carry between 30 and 34 different virulent pathogens and parasites. We are talking about highly contagious and destructive illnesses like brucellosis, E. coli, and the devastating African swine fever. The real danger here is the cross-contamination factor. Because these hogs are constantly breaking into commercial farming operations to steal food or interact with domestic animals, they can easily pass these deadly pathogens directly to our livestock. If a disease like African swine fever managed to break into the main commercial pork industry in America, it could trigger a total shutdown of international trade, force the culling of millions of farm animals, and cause the immediate collapse of a multi-billion-dollar domestic industry. And it is not just a threat to livestock. Diseases like brucellosis can easily cross over the species barrier to infect humans, causing severe, chronic flu-like symptoms, organ damage, and long-term health complications for hunters, farmers, or anyone who accidentally comes into contact with contaminated meat or water. When you combine billions of dollars in yearly agricultural destruction, the systematic poisoning and erosion of our natural water systems, and a rolling biological threat capable of sparking a massive agricultural or human health pandemic, it becomes painfully obvious that the wild hog crisis is one of the most dangerous, multifaceted threats facing North America today. So, with a multi-billion-dollar crisis on our hands, the big question is, how do we stop them? For a long time, the go-to answer for most people was simple. Grab a rifle, head out into the woods, and start shooting. It sounds like the perfect setup for weekend recreational hunting. And on paper, you would think that millions of eager hunters out there would easily make a dent in the hog population. But in reality, traditional sport hunting has turned out to be a complete and total failure. In fact, it has actually made the entire problem a whole lot worse. Here is why. Wild hogs are incredibly intelligent animals. When a group of hunters goes out and shoots just 2 or 3 hogs out of a larger family group, which is called a sounder, they are essentially educating the survivors. The remaining hogs immediately learn the sounds of trucks, human scent, and gunfire. They become hyper-aware, change their behavior overnight, and go completely nocturnal, doing all their damage under the cover of pitch-black darkness. Even worse, the scattered survivors will fracture into smaller groups and scatter into brand new territories where they have never been seen before, spreading the invasion even further. And there is a darker side to the sport hunting culture too. Because wild hog hunting became such a popular, lucrative hobby, some rogue hunters and crooked outfitters started intentionally capturing these hogs, transporting them across state lines, and illegally releasing them into pristine forests, just so they would have something new to hunt the following weekend. Instead of helping control the problem, human recreational habits ended up fueling the fire. Realizing that traditional hunting was failing miserably, wildlife biologists and state authorities had to completely change their playbook and shift to high-tech, strategic solutions. The gold standard right now, the absolute core strategy that actually works, is a method called whole sounder trapping. Instead of targeting individual hogs, this method aims to eliminate the entire family unit at the exact same time, so there are 0 survivors left to reproduce or learn from the experience. This isn't your grandfather's old box trap either. We are talking about massive, high-tech corral traps that utilize cellular networks, live streaming video feeds, and infrared thermal cameras. Wildlife managers will set up these giant circular pens in areas with high hog activity and bait them with corn for days or even weeks. They wait patiently until the live video feed on their smartphones shows that every single member of that hog family, from the massive matriarch sow down to the tiniest piglet, is comfortably inside the enclosure eating. Then, with a single tap on a phone screen from miles away, the operator drops the heavy gate remotely. Just like that, the entire lineage is captured at once, completely cutting off their ability to breed or adapt. When the terrain is too wide open for trapping, like the massive flat expanses of western Texas or the northern plains, authorities bring out the heavy artillery, which is aerial gunning from helicopters. Specialized teams fly low over the landscape using thermal imaging to spot massive herds from the sky. This allows them to sweep through and eliminate large numbers of hogs in a matter of minutes, covering ground that would take ground crews months to navigate. It is highly effective for rapid population reduction, but it comes with a massive catch. It is incredibly expensive to charter helicopters, maintain aircraft, and pay for specialized fuel and professional marksmen, making it a tough option to sustain on a tight state budget. That brings us to the cutting edge of this ecological war, the holy grail that scientists are working on right now, which is biochemical control. For years, researchers have been looking for an effective, humane, and safe toxicant to handle this crisis on a massive scale, and they are currently running extensive field trials on a compound called sodium nitrite. If that name sounds familiar, It is because it is a common preservative used in low doses in everyday foods like bacon and hot dogs. Humans and most domestic animals can process it just fine in small amounts. But hogs have a unique flaw in their biology. They lack a specific enzyme needed to break down sodium nitrite safely. When a wild hog eats a specially formulated bait loaded with this compound, it triggers a condition that rapidly reduces the ability of their red blood cells to carry oxygen throughout their body. The hog essentially falls asleep and passes away peacefully within a matter of hours. The biggest hurdle right now is designing highly advanced, hog-specific bait dispensers that can only be opened by the immense physical strength and snouts of a wild hog, ensuring that native wildlife like deer, raccoons, or bears cannot access the poison. It is a high-stakes game of trial and error, but mastering these modern tools is our only real shot at turning the tide against this unstoppable invasion. Here is the math we cannot ignore. We have to eliminate 70% of these wild hogs every single year just to keep their numbers from growing. But looking at this crisis, the biggest takeaway isn't about the animals. It is a powerful reminder that whenever we try to bend nature to our own selfish desires, it always finds a way to break back. This isn't just a battle for farmers anymore. Winning this ecological war requires all of us, the government, scientists, and everyday people looking out for each other and reporting every single track. When we stop acting like individuals and start working as a tight-knit community, we can truly heal the land we call home. What do you think is the best way to handle this crazy invasion? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button to join our community and support the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I will see you guys in the next video.